Welcome to Extreme Lives, coming to you from Bangkok, Thailand. Tonight we're going to be talking about the insurgency in Southern Thailand. I'm joined tonight by Don Pathan, who is a security and conflict analyst who has lived and worked in Southern Thailand for 20 years. Don, welcome to Extreme Lives. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Don, you have lived and worked in Southern Thailand for about 20 years.
Correct.
We're now in the second wave of this conflict that's been going on now for 14 years. Can you tell me a little bit about how we got to this stage and explain a little bit about the first wave and the second wave of the conflict?
The first wave started in the 60s, in the early 60s, and it ended in around late 80s, early 90s. The first wave came about 50 years after the border was drawn between the Siam and British Malaya. After it was drawn, the Patani Malay did not challenge the Thai sovereignty or Siam sovereignty. The armed insurgency came more or less 50 years later. Went under in the late 80s, early 90s, after a very generous amnesty program from the Thai state. But the narrative never went away. The second wave came back using the same grievances, the same narrative, came back in around 2001, but it was not recognized until an arms heist in January 2004, when scores of militants made off with about 350, 400 pieces of military weapons after they raided an army battalion. And that's when the Thai state, Bangkok government, under Thaksin Shinawatra at the time, officially acknowledged that we have a second wave of Patani Malay insurgency on our hand.
So you're saying it's the same narrative. Can you explain what that narrative is? I mean, who are the interested parties here, and what are they fighting for?
Basically, the narrative said that this is a lost territory. This is a Malay homeland, and the Siamese/Thailand are invaders. And the first generation were more nationalist. The second generation were made up of people from the BRN, Barisan Revolusi Nasional. And the BRN bases, their support base are the villagers and the local madrasa. So that explains why a lot of the combatants under this generation tend to be pious, although they're quite violent.
We'll move on to the nationalist versus Islamist narrative soon, but I wanted to know, because you live there and you've lived there for 20 years, so what is it like living down there? Because it's not a particularly well-reported conflict or well-understood conflict. Can you explain what life is like there?
Well, I've been going there for 20 years, but I lived there for about 10, 11 years now. And life goes on. The area is not besieged. That's one of the biggest misconception. People are afraid to go down there because they're afraid that they would get hit by an IED or get caught in a gunfight between the insurgent and the Thai security forces. But in reality, life goes on. People make ways to the area is predominantly Malay Muslim, about 85%, and that 15% are mainly Thai Buddhist, Thai Chinese Buddhist. And I would argue that the fabric of society is still there, very much intact, especially among the older generation. But there's a problem with the newer generation of people. They don't talk to each other as much as the older generation. You can see in the tea shop talking about weathers and this and that, and local politics or what have you. But the area is not besieged. Life goes on. Like, for example, in Patani, Yala, Narathiwat, the three commercial center, the ethnic Chinese control all the local politics. All the Chamber of Commerce, all the mayor office are all local Thai Chinese. And the Malay have no problem with that. Their problem, the grievances, is with the Thai state. And the grievances is that the Thai state does not recognize their differences, their cultural differences, their narrative.
So what is it that they want? What are they asking for?
If you ask the BRN, of course, they would say an independent state. But everybody said that around here in Southeast Asia, whether it's Free Aceh movement in Indonesia or the Moros in Southern Philippines. But eventually, when they come to the table, they will settle for something less than full independence. We're not really sure that we could say that in Southern Thailand because they have not really come to the table. You have a peace process, but not the right people are sitting there.
So who are the major players then? I mean, you obviously have the Thai government, the Thai military. Who represents the insurgents?
Well, on the other side, you have a umbrella group called Mara Patani, and these are made up of people who were active in the previous wave of insurgency that went under in the late 80s. After that, they were giving asylum in various countries. Many live in Sweden, Northern Europe, in Southeast Asia, Malaysia, Indonesia. But they want to make a comeback. But the problem with that is that they don't control the combatant on the ground. The one group that controls the combatant on the ground is the BRN, and the BRN are not coming to the table. They're not ready to come to the table.
And who is their leadership? Are they well known? Are they people who considered a table or not?
Well, it's a very secretive organization, even at the cell level. When they started off, back in 2001, it's, one cell would not know the other. Maybe only the cell leaders. That's the way it's structured. So it's foolproof. I mean, the Thai can take down one cell, but they cannot reach the second cell. That's the way it's structured. And also from the lower level to a higher, to the upper chain of command, is also quite secretive. They have some idea who they want to talk to, the Thai side, but again, at first they thought this person would be a person who represent BRN, but it turned out that was not the case. And I'm talking about the peace process that was launched by the then Prime Minister Yingluck Shinawatra back in 2013, but it fell apart within a few months later after they realized that they didn't have the right people.
Do they have the right people now, or is this an entrenched problem that they've got with in terms of who is going to talk to who?
Oh no, they don't have the right people. The right people are not coming. They're not ready to talk. And what they want is they look around the region, the GAM in Aceh and the MILF in Mindanao, and that's what they want. They want recognition. They want legitimacy. They need training, and until they get that, they're not going to come to the table.
So what is their method of the insurgency? What are their tactics? What kind of day to day or week to week? Because all we hear is like a bomb has gone off, or some military people have been killed, or some insurgents have been killed. There doesn't seem to be any method to it. So can you explain the logic behind how they run this insurgency?
Well, the insurgents are part of the community. They live among the villagers, and unless they become known and their names and their pictures get posted all over the place, so then they go underground, meaning that they move deeper in the jungle or move around from place to place. They have a support base, which is the community, that provide assistance to them in terms of logistics, even food. Say if there's a makeshift camp in your community and near your village, it's more or less your duty to feed them. So, but these camps don't stay there long. They're not like in the previous generation. They had camps, and a lot of times they camped along with the CPM, the Communist Party of Malaya people, in that area. So it was a matter of will from the Thai security forces to climb up the hill and duke it out with them. Today, they don't have these kind of camps anymore. They're all over the place. They're everywhere but nowhere. And so, and they have multiple roles. 1 minute you could be, tapping your rubbers or feeding your chicken. The next minute you set off a roadside bomb, and then follow up with a brief gunfight, and then go back to your life, as a farmer, as a rubber tapper, or whatever.
Disappear into the shadows.
Exactly.
But so where do they get the training from then? How do they learn the techniques of making an IED? Where do they get their weapons from? How are they armed? Is there any outside interference, outside groups who are coming in to provide this training?
No, there's outside group, but that's not. They mainly try to change the narrative or change the political context to make this ethno-nationalist struggle into a jihadist struggle, meaning the banner should not be for Patani but for Islam. But that hasn't worked. People said the Bali bombers, Mukhlis, Amrosi, Hambali, have all been down there, and they all returned home empty-handed. The narrative is still very much a Patani Malay nationalist. In terms of training and knowledge on how to make bombs, the knowledge never went away. Keep in mind there was only about 8 or 9 years of pause between the first wave and the second wave. So the knowledge never went away. In terms of weapons, you don't need that many weapons. After that first heist, the January 2004, when they made off with almost 400 pieces of weapons, that was enough. they're not fighting a conventional warfare or nothing less, nothing like what you see in Burma, where you have a traditional classical insurgency where groups like Wa, Chin, Kachin control their own territory. They're here in this wave of insurgency. They're more interested in controlling the mental space rather than the geographical space. So that way that it allows them to change, multiple lives, as combatant and as farmers.
So when you were saying that some high and senior players from Jemaah Islamiyah have come to Southern Thailand to try to change that narrative away from a nationalist struggle into an Islamist struggle, what do you think it is about this particular conflict that makes it resistant to outside knowledge, interference, however you want to deem it?
I often get that question from a lot of the diplomats here in Bangkok. Why hasn't the political context changed? What is it about Islam, or what is it about the Malay, Patani Malay in Southern Thailand? And I think it's in their culture and religion that prevent radical ideas. Keep in mind this: the Malay Muslim in Southern Thailand, like most of the Muslim in Southeast Asia, embrace what we call Shafi'i school of thought, which is one of the four schools of thought in Sunni Islam. And the school of thought, the four schools of thought permits local culture, local beliefs, popular beliefs sometimes, to combine with Islam. And the danger of, if you remove the culture aspect of it, what do you have? You become puritanical. And once you become puritanical, then that's when you become extremist. That's the normal explanation I get when I ask the insurgent, why have you change your banner from Patani Malay to Struggle Islam? And that's the kind of explanation I would get. And also they would add that, and also what we're doing, fighting for Patani, there's nothing in Islam that's against that, So what we're doing is not wrong in religious sense. So you see a lot of expression in the South, like for example when the insurgents, when they buried the insurgent, they're burying as martyr, as shahid.
You did say, though, that the first wave of the conflict was more nationalist, the second wave is more Islamist. In what way has it become more of a religious struggle?
No, just the expression, you see it in the funeral, for example, and you see that, like sometime I sit in an interview with a cell, for example, and they would say, we have to pray, they pray 5 times a day, but not all, not all, but.
And there's also an exchange of people, really, isn't there, within the sort of Islamic tradition of going away to study Islamic thought. So you have a lot of young Malay Muslims from that area who go to the Middle East, who go to South Asia to study in some of the more fundamentalist theories of Islam. Yet there's no evidence that they're coming back and trying to change things on the ground. Is there any evidence of that at all?
Well, there is, but not part of the struggle. I mean, keep in mind that in Islam, like any religion, there's competing ideas, competing school of thoughts. But at a given time, you have about 3,000 students from Thailand studying in Al-Azhar, for example. And about 2,000 of that 3,000 come from the far south, the Malay-speaking south. And I did this one study with Rajaratnam School, and we look at it, and it seems like they came back stronger Shafi'i. When you go into that kind of environment with various school of thoughts, from the, including the Shiites, including the Christians, various sects of Christianity, so you're kind of forced to rethink about your own identity, your own belief system, and a lot of the people would question themselves, what's wrong with my grandfather's way? Nothing. So they come back stronger Shafi'i, which it's a local Islam that combines popular beliefs that predate Islam.
When we think of it sort of in a normal sort of lens of looking at how extremism can manifest somewhere, you see a lot of the drivers in Southern Thailand because under the security law, there have been a lot of human rights abuses, a lot of killings, extrajudicial killings. There have been almost nobody held to account for deaths and torture and disappearances. How much does that drive the conflict? How much do you hear about that pushback against the Thai state in those terms where there are accusations made against the way that the Thai military operates down south?
Oh, very much so. It becomes part of the narrative, and it reinforces the notion that the Thai state has never been fair to you. Look at Tak Pai massacre, for example. That really come in handy with the insurgent, so they use that. It can become part of that narrative to reinforce the belief that we have to separate from the Thai state. But it doesn't change the political context of the struggle.
So this is a group of insurgents who have the means to attack further into the Thai state. They could attack tourism, the tourism industry, the very lucrative tourism industry. They have sent warnings in the past.
Right.
At what point do you think that might become a reality? Because that's really a huge fear of the Thai government, that a bomb may go off in a tourist resort.
That's a good question. I think one of the things that go through their mind is that what they want is international acceptance, and they know that if they push the envelope too far, they will become "quote unquote" terrorists, not insurgent, not combatant, not freedom fighter in their language. So they're not going to push too far. But they have gone out of that traditional theater of violence to hit, like for example, I think a couple of years ago in August, they hit 7 provinces in the upper south. Lots of tourists there, but I think only 3 or 4 people got killed. But none of the bomb had shrapnel. Even the arson attack during the time, they used dry alcohol, just big flame and quickly burn out. So the idea was not to destruction for destruction's sake, or after body count, but to send a strong message to the Thai state that we can go out of the far south if we want to. Just like Samui, they did set off a bomb in a shopping mall, but they're in the car. The bomb was put in the car, but there's no shrapnel, and the car was parked away from people, so nobody got injured.
Samui, obviously being a major tourist destination.
Exactly. So the idea, and not only that, the bottleneck, considered the bottleneck of getting a car in there. So if God Samui could be hit, any place could be hit in Thailand. That's the message, really.
Yeah, and those of us who live in Thailand know that you go into any major shopping mall, you have to pass through metal detectors. Any 5-star hotel, you pass through metal detectors. There is a real sense in Bangkok and other parts of Thailand that there is a threat, whether or not it's a severe threat or not, there is a threat. So you speak to all sides in this conflict. What does the Thai government, the military that is ruling Thailand at the moment, what are they saying? What are their fears?
Well, they are concerned about the possibility of Bangkok or the insurgency, the violence to get out. But right now, I think more or less they're more comfortable with the fact that it's not going to get out. They have sent messages in the past, but they won't, cross the line and to become "quote unquote" terrorists. Going after people's lives, for example. So the far south has not become a major issue or concern for the policymaker here. They have other consideration, like the constitution or the next election, how to come back, and all that seems to be more important for them rather than the insurgents in the south.
Because you're in quite a unique situation where you can talk to all the stakeholders in this conflict, and it mustn't be very appealing for those who are working for recognition in the south that they're not really a high priority for the government.
Right. Yeah. For me, I live there. I take my daughters to school in the morning, and I have to drive by these checkpoints, and then I look at the motorbikes, and first thing that comes to my mind is that there's a bomb laced to that, So as a father with an 8-year-old and 6-year-old daughters, that's the kind of thing that goes through my mind, And when I drive, I see a police car, I keep at least 40 meters away, in case a roadside bomb, or a motorcycle bomb go off, and I won't be a collateral. So that's on a day-to-day basis that I have to live with that, day in, day out. But on the policymakers, for the junta, what they're concerned about is the legacy. They don't want to be seen as the people who gave away Patani, to the Malays. So they're not even dealing with group like Mara Patani, for example, the umbrella group. They reluctantly deal with them, and they don't even call them Mara Patani. They call them Party B. They feel that if they call them Mara Patani, it would be too much recognition, too much legitimacy, unnecessarily legitimacy given it to these guys who challenge Thai narrative, who question Thailand nationhood.
So 14 years into the second wave of the conflict, there just seems no urgency. On either side. to find a resolution. Is that a fair assessment?
Yes, I would say that. I mean, some people even jokingly like, these policy leaders, makers, they're not going to change their mind unless Bangkok is hit. And the insurgents in the south say we're not going to hit Bangkok. If we do, we become terrorists, and nobody would talk to us.
But 7,000 people have been killed. It's
Right.
it's a huge amount of people.
Right,
So,
but it's I guess the news down there doesn't get much headline from anywhere really.
yeah.
I mean, it makes headline in the national paper, but the way they treat it more like crime, not a political conflict.
And how do you work with it in this very delicate situation of having access to having a conversation with all sides, and maybe you can explain also the position of Malaysia in this, because obviously it's down on the border. How do you communicate between?
Well, I tell
parties?
people down there, the researchers, academics who go down there, people who go there, I tell them the only thing that could save your life here is your integrity. If you cross them, they have no problem killing you. What's more, one more guy, so 7,000 people already. So that's what I tell myself all the time, don't fool them, don't try to outsmart them. Just, and then again, it's not my profession. I am part of the community. I've been reporting on it since late 90s, but when I left journalism about 6-7 years ago, I mean, that kind of job is kind of carried on forward into my work as a NGO, local NGO, but my organization, Patani Forum, we don't do mediation, we do a lot of public discussions about the nature of the conflict, but as an individual, I've been asked by both sides to relay messages. I guess you could say a passive inside mediator, if you could call it that. I mean, I don't go actively try to bring them to the table, but there are times when I have to get clarification on both sides.
What would it take to bring them to the table?
Well, I guess my work speaks for itself. I've been writing about it, and I still write about it, but as a security analyst, and I write about it because I mainly write about the peace process, and that's because I feel that both sides, to prevent both sides from hijacking the narrative, and of course, the Patani, they have explanation, the Thai side have their explanation. I like to offer my own explanation,
And Malaysia has been the traditional mediator.
Right.
But
yeah.
Are they disengaged enough from this conflict to be an honest broker in this?
I have always said that Malaysia is not an honest broker because they share the same border. They have a security concern. They do not want the insurgency, the violence to spread into their border. So in that respect, they're not an honest broker. They're a stakeholder. And in my discussion with the Thai policymakers and the military, and they more or less acknowledge that. They basically say Malaysia has to be there to manage their complexities. That's the explanation. But eventually, I think the idea is to have when the situation is ripe, when the real BRN is prepared to come to the table, and when the Thailand is willing to make some concession, and one of the concessions is to have outside, foreign mediators, a government or an INGO to come and guide this process. Then you would have a real process.
And what about the accusations that a lot of money is being made out of this conflict, that there are issues of drug trafficking, human smuggling, and that some people have a stake in keeping this conflict going? Is there any truth in that?
Well, that's usually the explanation for people who argue that the Thai military is keeping it alive so they can benefit from it. But this is Thailand, it doesn't corruption is everywhere. It doesn't have to be, it's not exclusively a southern conflict thing, so I don't think, they keep it alive to make money. Although some people make money from the conflict, I don't doubt that, or any conflict, or even in the street in Bangkok, when police take bribes or whatever, But that's one explanation from people who are kind of frustrated and seek a quick explanation as to why this thing is keep on and hasn't come to an end. What's your other questions? Sorry.
We can move on. I wanted to talk. We always talk about in these conversations. We talk about how people are recruited and how they become involved in insurgent groups, extremist groups. How does that happen in the South?
Well, I think the minute they walk out of the house, what do they see? They see Thai troops driving back and forth, patrolling back and forth, armed. They don't speak the local language. They're outsider, So you see it when you go to government office, or public school, where you're supposed to speak Thai. Not just Thai, but you have to speak a Central Thai dialect. And for a lot of people, it's the first time for them speaking Thai, and the Thai doesn't take. They never really thought about bilingual education, So you're reminded you're an outsider, you're a second-class citizen in your own homeland, So you don't have to go far.
The education system and everything is in Thai.
Exactly, But you can't say the same thing about the private sector. If you look at the department stores, like Big C, for example, or even the Chinese shops owners, and the shop they have. It's written Chinese, written Yawi, which is Malay, written Arabic script, and in Thai, So, and a lot of these people speak good enough Malay to communicate with the local people, So they make efforts, and that explains why the fabric of society is still very much intact, because the Buddhists, who are a minority there, make efforts to reach out, to understand, or try to communicate. With the state, it's like you have to be Thai, but Thai like me, and you have to speak my dialect. So think about how ethnocentric or somewhat racist that is, and that's the way the locals see it, as a very ethnocentric policy. And what's worse is that they feel that for the Malay Muslim, they feel that it comes at the expense of their religious identity. Now, keep in mind that for Malay, Patani Malay anyway, being Muslim and being Malay is two sides of the same coin. So when the Thai state try to change that identity, it affects their religious identity as well. So that explains why armed insurgency came 50 years after they drew the border with the British, not immediately after, in I think 1909, I believe.
So the insurgency is very much within the community and very accepted to be part of the insurgency then.
Exactly.
Very, very accepted.
Right. And they listen to the community.
And in terms of when there is an attack somewhere, there is never a claim of responsibility either, which is unusual for any kind of insurgent group globally. Why do they not make a claim of responsibility on social media or a statement to the media, as many outlets do? They'll send a statement to a news agency to claim responsibility, often many of them at the same time. Why does that not happen? And if that's not happening, how are they communicating with the Thai government, with the Thai military?
Well, good questions. 2 points. One, it's insurgency anywhere really is a communicative action. You have a state and non-state actor going at it. A lot of times it's a subnational conflict, and the communication here is really between the two sides. The scope here is really small between the separatist combatant, and the Thai military. And it's people like me who kind of go back and forth to verify certain attack. Not every attack, I'm only one person, and I don't have an organization behind me to do this. But it's a communicative action. A lot of it is response to certain things that the Thai military did. But this kind of statement or claim does not make it in the public space. Like for example, the Thai never acknowledged that the attack 2 years ago on the 7 Upper South was the work of the insurgent force or the Samui. But in private conversation, they would acknowledge that, private conversation with me, So in that level, they have, the scope is still very much between the combatant and the security forces. Where you look at other conflicts, say like Afghanistan, for example, a camera is just as important as RPG. Without that, why is a camera important? Because, you take out a Humvee, Ma and Pa in Oklahoma need to see that, So that's why the camera is important. For these guys, they don't film the attack, they don't tape it, they don't come out with the spokesman, with the claim of responsibility. And for them to do that, you would have to have what we call a political wing, and the Thai won't acknowledge that, For the Thai, they use the Thai law, and in their eyes, all these people are criminals, So you don't have a Sinn Féin, and you don't have an IRA, you don't have that kind of arrangement.
Anyone who stood up to speak would just be arrested,
exactly.
Taken away. So so it's self-protection.
The Thai doesn't want to deal with that kind of discussion. If you have you have a political wing, for example, like the GAM guys, the negotiators would be quote unquote the unofficial, the political wing, for example, and they live in Banda Aceh, and when they need to negotiate, they get their passport back and fly to Northern Europe to negotiate with the government. You know, you don't have that kind of arrangement in Thailand, and I think Thai policymakers don't want the headache, you know, to explain to the foreigners. They think they can resolve this themselves. They think they could buy this guy out. You know, and
well, 14 years in, it doesn't really seem like it's getting too far down the negotiation road.
exactly, because the guy who controlled the combatant could see that, and they're not interested in talking to people who try to outsmart them. You know, if you negotiate, you're gonna have to.
Don Pathan, thank you so much. It's really interesting talking to you. I think there's going to be many more discussions about this in the years ahead. It doesn't look like it's going to end anytime soon.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us at Extreme Lives. You can watch all the interviews that we have done so far on our Facebook page, and you can sign on to our YouTube channel as well. We'll come back with another interview in a few weeks' time from Bangkok. Thank you very much for watching.